Arnaud, welcome again to one of our episodes here in Landa Talks. Really excited to learn from your experience. You've done a little bit of content strategy. You have multiple clients, so I know we can get a lot from this conversation. We mentioned a little bit of the structure. It's going to be a regular Q&A and then questions from the audience. I don't know if you can maybe start telling us a little bit more about your background, your career so far. How did you get into marketing, content, strategy, etc.?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I've been following Landa Club on LinkedIn for many years now. So when I received the invitation, I was very, very happy. And so to give some background about me, I've done a bit of everything. I study psychology, then I moved to finance. I got into a bank. I worked as a large cap credit analyst. I liked the job, but I didn't like the team and and the mood of the banking of the bank. So I decided to join a fintech to have something more flexible, agile, a little bit of more of innovation. All that in France, because as you can hear, I'm French. But very quickly I started to work remotely, and I had itchy feet, so I wanted to discover the world. And I spent a lot of time traveling before the pandemic. So I was a digital nomad before it was cool. And I spent a lot of time in Latin America. And working from a co-working in Medellin, I was brainstorming some startup ideas, and I randomly met my co-founders. We were working at the same table. So every day we would go for a coffee and we would talk about everything, but we would talk a lot about business. And on the side, we started to work on something, talk to customers, build an MVP. And to make the story short, that's how I got into marketing. Because my background at that time was not marketing at all. Obviously, I studied psychology, and in business school, when I did my master's degree, it was finance, my specialization, but we had some classes of marketing. So I had some basics of marketing, but I really learned about marketing and content doing my startup, because then you have a product and then you're like, okay, now what? You need to sell. So you do marketing and you do sales. That's how I learned most of it. And I really like it. And I realized how important is it? Like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to master acquisition, and acquisition at scale come from marketing. So when I left the operation of my startup 3 years ago, I decided to get even more into marketing, and especially like in content marketing. Big fan of content marketing, and I think today people know me mostly for that. So I started CNews, the newsletter, with the idea to do networking. So first was like, okay, I have no network. I'm in Mexico City. I did my startup in Colombia, but then when I left, I moved back to Mexico, because I had lived in Mexico before and I knew so much was happening here. And I did CNews to, first of all, to do networking, and it worked.
That's amazing. And maybe tell us a little bit more on how you got into fractional work, right? Because you've been a founder, you run a couple of corporations. Like, maybe we can start with the basics. How did you land your first client? That's always a really good story.
Yeah. So first, why did I choose the fractional model? It's because I always wanted to keep working on my project, so I didn't want it to go full time. So when I found about fractional, I was like, okay, that's something for me, because I needed to pay for my tacos, so I needed some cash. But at the same time, I wanted to keep building my project. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I always wanted to do it. And also, I'm very curious. Like, I'm super curious. I love to work on many projects. The fractional model is great because you can work with a few clients at the same time, and then you can see a little bit of everything. So that's why I choose the fractional model. And I landed my first clients thanks to content, thanks to CNews. I built CNews to do networking, and with that networking, I could land my first clients. And also, creating content when you're selling like fractional services about content marketing, it helps.
For sure. We've seen this across the board. You give value first, and then that's when the world starts getting back to you. So fully aligned with that. And I know a lot of members have very similar stories. But yours came from content, and that's, like, I would say, like a little bit more specific. So thanks for sharing that, Arnaud. I wanted to switch maybe gears a little bit more about your advisory experience, because you've been doing this for a while, and I feel like most people here are more so in the 0 to 1 stage. And one of the biggest things I would say to bring to the table for a new gig is just early wins, right? So I don't know if you can tell me a little bit of how you structure these consulting gigs to get those aha moments a little bit early in the engagement.
Yeah, so it's a good question. And obviously it's very complicated because when you're doing fractional work, you're not an agency. So if you have a service agency, you can structure your offer and processes. The value of being fractional is like you're selling your time and your expertise. So clients are looking more for customized, on demand. So it's very hard to have like a very defined process, and it's better to have this flexibility to adapt to the client's need. So to the date, I don't have a very structured process. Obviously, there's the basic one. You start with the clients, you do an audit and stuff like that. But what I've realized is that clients, they don't really want too much of the strategy and they want more execution. So usually I try not to emphasize too much the strategy. I try to kind of hide it. We're going to do it anyway. Like we're going to do the audit and we're going to do the strategy calls, but I put more emphasis on the execution. And that's how I got to the aha moment. First of all, it's easier to close because when you talk more about like real work and results, it's easier to sell than just being like, oh, I'm going to do your strategy. And it means everything and nothing. And then also you have to keep it in mind since day one. Don't spend too much time on strategy. Strategy, you can still do it, even if you start doing execution. So just do as little strategy as you can and get into execution as fast as possible to get to that aha moment. And then you can spend more time working on strategy. Also, strategy works better with data. So as soon as you start building or working, the better data you have to build a better strategy.
That's a very complete answer. So thanks for that, Arnaud. And then maybe just jumping a little bit into the future on what you're using right now, right? Are there any maybe specific tools, methods, or frameworks that you're actually implementing more like on the back end that is more consistent today, but maybe you didn't implement in the past for these gigs?
I try to implement Notion. I'm a big fan of Notion with the clients. Some clients were not using Notion or still not using Notion. I feel like having like one place where you can organize everything makes it easier, first of all, and also give a better overview to the clients about what you're doing. And also they can connect. So if you're building a new page and you're working on something, they can see it in real time without having to ask you, hey, what are you doing? Are you still alive? You know? So I would say Notion is my go-to place. I don't have a lot of tools. I mean, on the back end, then for content creation, I use Notion myself. I use Google a lot, like the Google Suite for many things. But I try to keep it simple. Notion, WhatsApp, and that's it. Or sometimes if it's a team, they put me on their Slack and I communicate on Slack.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I feel like that's one of the big differences that Fractional brings, right? You are actually there rolling up your sleeves and getting into the communication channels of clients actually helps a lot with giving that feeling, right? Like I'm part of your team for now. Amazing. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit to content, which obviously is your specialty. And a lot of us, I know people are like listening here, trying to build their personal brands. So I want to expand a lot on just because, you've seen it more than most. So I just wanted to start maybe first with a success case story with, a client that you've had in the past, where maybe you implemented some of your strategies and they earned like very quick wins. What did you see? How did you develop that product? Can you tell me a little bit more about that project in general?
Yeah, I can talk about content for hours.
Let's
do it. So yeah, first of all, I'm in the business of B2B content. And most of my clients, I need to educate them first about we're going to do B2B business and not B2C. So stop looking for the result of B2C. You don't want to be the next Hormozy unless you want to sell courses. But if you are building your startup, which is a SaaS B2B, that's not the strategy you need to take. And that's not the result you should focus on. So for the first part of the question, to results I've been proud of with clients. One is I took a B2B founder. He has a digital agency, it's like a studio. And in a year and a few months, we got the top voice badge with less than 5,000 followers. So I think he had like 3.5 thousand followers, which is not a lot at all. And it was proof that if you focus on quality, you can have better result than just looking for 100,000 followers, which is not adding value to your business. Why it add value to have the top voice badge? Because it gives credibility and trust. And when you're selling B2B services or product, you need credibility and trust more than anything else. So that was one. And another one was I'm working a lot with startup and VC. It's my niche, even if I'm open to other kind of client, it's where I'm best at. And I worked with a VC from the region for their fundraising process. So VC are venture capitalists, they are the investor investing in startup, and they have also investors which are called LPs. And to reach that kind of clients or of people and to convince them to invest in your fund, we are talking big numbers here. It's a long process, and I convinced them about doing it with content, and we got results. There was more than $1 million. Not only thanks to content, it will be a lie, but it helps a lot in the fundraising process.
For sure. It's funny because this just comes in a time where we saw Andreessen Horowitz buying like a podcast production company from Eric, the founder of OnDeck as well. I guess like as a follow-up, which I think might be interesting to this chat, but how important is it as a founder to create a personal brand? Because I feel like that's something that people maybe don't have like so much clarity. I guess in these kind of works, you're doing it more from a founder perspective, or are you doing the content strategy for both the founders and the companies itself? And what's working better, I guess? Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so right now I'm not talking about personal brand anymore with founders. I'm just talking about creating content. It's like content, it's called content marketing. It's part of marketing. You like it or not, you choose to be a founder, you have to do everything. You don't like doing accounting, too bad. You choose to be a founder, you need to do accounting. And so right now it's more about content than personal brand. And I give always that example. I have a lot of examples, but even if you do personal content, if you do it right, people will remember your startup and your mission more than your name. And I can tell you that, like, there is one founder right now. He's raising $2 million for his startup. He's on LinkedIn building his personal brand. I don't remember his name, but I know exactly the name of his startup, and I know what he's doing right now, which is raising $2 million. So it works, you know, and he's just doing it with his personal account under his name. So it's not personal branding anymore, especially in the startup world. If you're a startup founder, there is no work-life balance. There is no line between work and life. You are your startup, and you should be representing your startup in a good way. So that's my point about it. And the second part of the question, I think, if I remember correctly, is that it's extremely important, and it's one of the few lever where you can win to the big competition, to the big guys. So you have very few resources in time, in people, and in money. That's the best growth lever you can activate to win over HubSpot or whoever big competitor you want to take on.
Fully agree. LinkedIn's worked great for us, by the way. So fully agree, on point. And I also just saw one of the posts that you just mentioned with the founder raising $2 million. So if we both know it, there's probably a bunch of people hearing this that are gonna know this again. So that might be just one of the examples to convince you. I guess switching gears maybe to startups with the most classic problem around limited resources, right? Like, how do you balance creating more like quick impact, quick wins in content versus maybe more like long-term positioning gains that usually take a little bit more time? How do you balance these in engagements? I'm curious.
Yeah, and a big mistake that people make, and I was convinced the same, like I was mistaken for a long time when I started creating content, but for a long time. I changed my mind about that like maybe 6-9 months ago. Is that if you create content, good content, you're gonna get a lot of inbound. And you just need to create content and the client's gonna come to you and it's gonna be 100% inbound. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very, very complicated. And it's mostly like if you got lucky more than having that as a strategy. So creating content should be the main assets of your acquisition strategy. So then you need to activate that content. You need to use that content to contact people. You need to use that contact to educate your future clients. You need to use that content to build FOMO. So, but then you need to go outside and hunt for your investors or your clients or your talent, and don't expect them to come. So I think that's very important. And I think that's answers the question or not. I don't remember.
No, it does. It does for sure. And I guess more applicable to the audience here, or who's actually going to hear it, which is maybe just starting. So like going back to like when you just started, what are some of those like maybe early tips on how people should get started, or how should they think about approaching, building their personal brand, specifically as fractionals, which you've probably seen a lot of?
Yeah. So yeah, it was about the quick win. So yeah, the quick win is use your content and then send it to the world, and focus more on quality, because you need to convince people that you are an expert. If you're selling fractional services, they need to be convinced that you are an expert. So it's very unlikely they're gonna find you thanks to your content. But when you're gonna reach out to them, they need something to see to make them feel comfortable that you're an expert, just to take the first call. So it happens a lot. Like if you contact them, they're gonna go to your LinkedIn profile and they're gonna check the last 3 posts or maybe 2 posts that you've posted. So make sure you are posting quality and not quantity, because you can lose them with one bad post. They come and your last post is not good. They're gonna be like, no, I don't want to talk with that person. They come, they read the last post you've posted on your LinkedIn. They're like, wow, he changed my mind about something, or I can see he really knows what he's talking about. They're gonna be like, okay, let's have a call. So that's one thing. The quick win is be very wary of the quality of your content on LinkedIn, not that much to attract people, but to convert people. And speaking of conversion, also try to have a converting format. So LinkedIn is good for pushing a lot of content, let's say maybe 3 times a week or 2 times a week, but also having like long form content also help to further convince some clients who might not be super ready, or to use them also to nurture them. So let's say you had a call with a potential client and you do a podcast episode or you do a newsletter, and then you can send it to them. And because it's very annoying when you're like, hey, what, like after a call, after 1 week, and just coming back for the follow-up being like, hey, what's up? Are you ready to buy? It's way better to come back with an asset, which is a piece of content of high value, and be like, hey, by the way, you remember we talked about this GTM strategy for Mexico? I did a podcast with the head of GTM of Kavak, and he shared a lot of tips. So maybe you can watch it, and you're gonna learn something, and then you're gonna be like, wow, cool, he's adding value. And also you can use a lot of psychology strategy, like with halo effect, because you are in touch with the head of growth of Kavak or whatever. But that's my advice.
That's great. And is there like a benchmark on what you see is working, maybe between this mix of long form, short form? Because I feel like everybody looks for benchmarks, right? Like what's actually working. So I guess first part of that question would be, do you see an ideal split between these kind of posts that's working more? And then second, what's maybe a benchmark that people can take away very quickly from this call to say like, hey, just do 1 post a week? Is there one? Does it exist? So like those would be my 2 follow-up questions.
So there is some basics number, but I would say like at minimum, if you want to get into content, do 2 pieces of content on LinkedIn every week, at least. It's a bare minimum, like two pieces of content a week on LinkedIn and one long form content every month. So either newsletter or blog article or podcast or YouTube video. So that would be the bare minimum.
I love it. I love it. Sometimes we just miss the benchmark. So it's good that experts is bringing those to us. I wanted to switch maybe gears more towards B2B content strategy, more specifically around your work. And obviously you're using multiple channels. You mentioned the newsletter, you mentioned obviously LinkedIn, which is, it's almost like the queen at the moment for everybody at the moment. But what differences are you seeing between these channels? Talking about potentially LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, etc. Like what's working, what's not working between them? Do you have specific content pieces that you use for one and not the other? So I'm curious to hear maybe just general thoughts around that as well.
Yeah, I have a few takes on that. So first of all, obviously LinkedIn, it's an obvious one, but even more now than before, the platform risk is huge. So I think a few years ago, you could build an audience just on one platform, and unless you are very big, the platform risk was not that big. But we can take the TikTok example in the US, something changed, and then the platform is banned or your account is banned. Like, because there is more creation of content, and especially like automatized, they are banning way faster than before. So it's very common now to get banned. And so if you build just on one platform, you lose everything from the next day, like from you wake up and it's gone. So be careful with that. So at first you cannot be everywhere, but try to diversify, because you're not trying to grow a lot, you're trying to convert a lot. So you can diversify. So that first. The second part is obviously you need to build for each platform. Just copy pasting doesn't work very well. It's very, very complicated. It's not the same content on Twitter than on LinkedIn, than on YouTube. You need to learn and adapt to the code of the platform. You can keep the same idea, because the idea is very important. Like, how you gonna attack an idea, and the angle or the expertise you're gonna put on that idea, it's very important. But then the format need to be adapted. So that's the other point. And to finish, it's also the question I got every time: where should I start? Which platform is the best? I always answer the same: it's a platform where you like the better to spend time on. And if you think that, I don't know, you're a startup and you're fundraising and you're like, oh, okay, I want to use it for fundraising to talk with VC. I'm like, because I'm also right now working with as a VC with the fund, like now I'm also on the VC side. I'm like, you know what? Like, you have one VC like in front of you. I'm on LinkedIn. Like, personally, I spend time consuming content on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, and you can ask anyone, everyone, they are all on all platforms. So like LinkedIn is B2B, right? But also like B2B are everywhere, because B2B are people. And I'm sure you are also on Instagram. You spend some time on LinkedIn. You spend some time on Spotify or whatever, And even Elon Musk is on Twitter and on YouTube and on LinkedIn, probably not on LinkedIn, but on YouTube for sure. So you know what I mean? Like, it's not true that for B2B, you need to be on LinkedIn. That's not true. Like, I can discover the next startup we're gonna invest in on Instagram or on Twitter or on YouTube.
For sure. And I agree with something you said. I relate a lot to, which is it's almost like every B2B sale ends up being a B2C sale, because at the end of the day, there's a person behind. One quick follow-up that I had, because you mentioned obviously different, social media platforms like Instagram, for example. Do you think it's a good idea for founders to, I guess, like start separating business accounts to like their own personal accounts? Is that something that you're seeing a lot of people doing? Is it working? Is it not working? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for me, at the beginning, if we talk early stage, the business account is just a vitrine. Like, if I go, let's say on Instagram, I will find them because of their personal account. And then maybe on their bio, they're going to be like, oh, founder of or at, and a link to their business account, like the startup account. And I will just click on the startup account to see if there is, I don't know, maybe 3 pictures or 1 video, but I won't spend time on the business account. So if it's early stage, you should focus just on the personal one and have the business one just to be like, hey, we exist, like we are real, and here is a corporate page of LinkedIn or the personal or the business account of Instagram. And when people be like, oh yeah, but then it's gonna be harder to sell the business, I'm like, first, make money. And then in 10 years, you can build your strategy, marketing strategy with the team, and then you can have a business account on Instagram and a business account on LinkedIn and whatever. But don't think too much about selling the business right now. First, focus on finding clients, right? And the best way to find clients right now when you're little is to do a personal account.
Totally agree. And then I wanted to touch again on this point around getting banned, because I feel like that's super interesting right now, and everybody's trying to own their distribution because everybody's heard a story of somebody getting banned. So first question is like, can you tell us maybe about an example of somebody you heard getting banned, or maybe it could be one of your clients, you don't need to use names, but how they went about maybe owning more of their distribution, or then if you don't have an example, if you have any tips on how to leverage more like of these channels where you own more of your lists, right? Because I feel like this is a topic that's coming up very often in founder channels. There's always somebody claiming that Meta banned them, or maybe LinkedIn or Instagram. So how do you go about that? And do you have any examples to share where this has happened and how they actually reverted the situation?
Yeah, so people always say you need a owned media, which is our distribution channel, which is basically email, because that's the only one you already own. So everyone's starting an email list. But it's very hard to convert people from LinkedIn or from Instagram to your email list. And also you need a strategy, because you add people to your email list and then what? You need a newsletter strategy, right? And another option is just like to be on 2 platforms. Because if people follow you on Instagram and LinkedIn, if you get banned on Instagram, they're gonna look for you on LinkedIn. And then you can on LinkedIn be like, oh, I've got banned on Instagram, And that's for me the best bet against the platform risk is to be on more than one. But the advice of doing your email list, if you don't have a newsletter strategy behind, first of all, it's harder to move someone from whatever social media to a newsletter than moving them between social media. And second, if you don't have a newsletter strategy, it's just useless.
Fully agree. We've used this tactic and it's worked wonder for us. So definitely push people towards this direction. It's hard, takes time, but usually it starts compounding, as with everything in life. I guess I wanted to switch gears again, maybe towards how you're like leveraging different channels to like monetize stuff. Because it sounds like you have the newsletter, you have the consulting firm, you're doing a little bit of investing with a firm. I guess just going right at it, like how have you monetized your expertise in these like multiple channels? Like what are you leveraging right now? Maybe how does that revenue split look like at the moment? What have you explored? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Because I feel a lot of people coming into Landa, they're looking at alternative paths to like monetizing their experience. So I'm curious to hear, after like a couple of years into this, what have you explored? What are you doing right now?
Yeah. So first of all, I can do many projects because they are in the same space. So I always say that, like, as a fractional, obviously you want to diversificate your revenue stream. You want something which is more cash flow. You want something which is more equity because you have leverage on equity. But it's easier if you keep everything on the same niche or space to serve the same kind of audience and clients. So everything I do, it's around startup VC in Latin America, like it's my niche. I'm open to the rest of the world, but it's my niche right now. Cash flow, it's my consulting business, it's my fractional work. So to pay for the bill and my tacos, it's fractional work, which is like pure cash flow, pure services. Then I have Senus, which is a newsletter, which is like a media company, which is like 50% cash flow, 50% equity. Because sometimes I have some deals on Senus, which can be ads on the newsletter, or now I have a paid version of the newsletter too. So I have some paid subscriber. So now I'm monetizing some cash flow with Senius, but also because it's a brand and it's more like a business project, there is 50% which could be equity, which in the future, because now I want to make Senius more like a business, could also have like the leverage of the equity. And then 100% equity is work I do as an investor with Zenani Capital. And here it's 100% equity. It's a long shot, but it's also the one who can make the biggest return. So that's how I split. I have some full cash, full equity, and one project which is 50% cash, 50% equity.
I really like it. You have it very, very well structured. So congrats on that. I guess one quick follow-up on that, because I feel this is something that people ask a lot, is should I start under a brand or under my own name? Especially when I'm starting new services like this, there's like this question around, should I build a company or almost like a brand that gives the services in the beginning? Or do you start more like with your personal name offering services? I would love to hear your take on it.
If you're alone, under your name. I've tried it. I make the mistake. At first, I wanted to build an agency, service agency around content, and I put a name on it. It was called Galaxio. And people were like, "Oh, so you have a team?" I was like, "No, it's just me." So it's not an agency. It's just you, you know. So I think it's easier just to start under your name if you're alone. And eventually, when you start to have too much clients, you can either have a co-founder or hire. And when you have a team, then you can build a brand. You can always build a brand after, but it's just like very confusing for the clients, because sometimes also they don't want to work with you because they think you're an agency. When they will have say yes, knowing that it's just you and it's gonna be you who gonna do the work. So if you're fractional, they want to work with you, and doing it under your own name, make it clear that they're gonna work with you. And if you make it under a brand, they'll be like, okay, maybe I'm gonna work with a junior from his team.
Agree. Amazing. And then I'll go with one last question and then go with quick questions for to just people to get to know you a little bit better. But is there an early mistake that you made in your career, especially with consulting, that you would just recommend others not to make, or how to approach this? Like one common thing that you see people maybe doing in the beginning, that you say like, beware of that. I made it. Probably everybody did. But anything that you want to highlight there?
Yeah, I mean, I made all the mistakes, but so the one I said was one, trying to build a brand because I had this ambition to do something big before just building like a portfolio of clients. That's one. The other one I made was not niching down enough. At first, I was offering growth services, and even people were like, okay, but what's growth? What's growth marketing? You know, and I was like, first it was just growth. Then I was like, okay, wait, but growth marketing, because people know at least it's marketing. And then I've niched down. I think it's easier to just sell one services. And if you know how to make, if you have like many skills, pick the strongest one or the one with more demand. And then you can always like upsells. So then gonna be like, okay, I do growth marketing. I do content marketing. And people are gonna be like, oh, do you know someone who's good at SEO? I've built that relationship with the client. He knows that I work well. I'll be like, oh yeah, I also do SEO. And they're like, okay, let's work together. And then you sell SEO. Or someone is gonna ask you. Like, I mean, for the communication, it should be just one skill, and then it should be more opportunistic to sell other skills which are related.
I love that. So I wanted to go to the quick questions section, because we went over a few minutes, but this was very interesting. Arnaud, thank you. First one would be, what's your favorite book or the one that you've gifted the most?
So my favorite book used to be a book from France, and there is no translation because it's from a guy, philosopher, who went to live with a monk, and he became a monk, and then he wrote a philosophy book about his experience working, living with monks Buddhist monks. So it's not very useful here because there is no translation. He just made it in French. Now my favorite book, which is not from philosophy, it's The Three-Body Problem. I'm a big fan of science fiction, and this book just blew my mind. And also I'm a big fan of Asia and China, and the fact that he's mixing science fiction with Chinese culture make it like super original and very interesting. Like, I'm a big fan of The Three-Body Problem.
Amazing, amazing. The second one I had is, what's one habit that you consistently follow that has changed your life?
Easy one, creating content every day.
Very, very tight to the conversation. And then last question, maybe more philosophical, but what's something that you'd like to be remembered for? Like one thing.
It's, for me, I don't really think about that, like just someone nice, like when people, when I die, like, when you go to someone's funerals, they always say good things about the person who died. I just hope that for me it's gonna be true and not just because they are polite. So I think that would be my answer.
That's amazing. That's a great answer. It's almost like leaving the world better than when you came here, right? Which is, I think, great. Where can people connect with you or not? Obviously, LinkedIn is one you're gonna say, but any other places that people might follow you, connect with you, or keep learning from you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really interested into startups and VC in LATAM, Spanish-speaking LATAM, please subscribe to CNews newsletter. I really put a lot of time on that, and I try to make like the best newsletter about startup and VC in LATAM. So please subscribe and give me feedback. Super happy to have feedback because I want it to be the best. So give me feedback. And then LinkedIn is the obvious place, I guess. I'm also on Twitter under the tag CNews Mexico or CNews LATAM because it used to be CNews Mexico, or on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Amazing.